So I saw an interesting post on LinkedIn yesterday. Somebody shared that. One of our partners basically hired an engineer, gave them the aem-live documentation, and said, "Build me a website." And within 7 hours, the developer came back and said, "Here's the website." Wasn't that hard? And I think that's really impressive, right? You could attribute a lot of, and could say, well, we made it easy, but I think for a developer getting started with any new kind of technology in 7 hours is impressive, and obviously something that we aim to make easier. So I was really happy to see this, and I think it's going to help us to grow this community, to make it more inviting, and to get more people into a place where they can create great websites, and of course get into a world where we have more great and especially more fast websites. So with that being said, we have a special guest today. Jake graciously decided to join us, and Jake posted something on LinkedIn that I thought that was basically last week's sensation. And Jake, I'm not going to steal your thunder, so if you just want to start sharing, introduce yourself, then we can get going with the demo.
Sure, thank you. My name is Jake. I'm from Melbourne. I run an agency called Noice that has been doing AM for a while, and obviously very interested in edge delivery services. I think I picked it up a couple of weeks ago and was pretty instantly very enamored by it, to be honest, after using AM for so long. I'll just share my screen.
How long is so long? How many years of experience does the agency have with?
With AEM?
Yeah.
For me, it's going on 10 years. For the agency, 3 years, I think we've been doing it.
Okay.
And like I've grown to love AEM with all of its faults and its eccentricities as well. But edge delivery I'm a front-end developer. My background is, so for me, it really ticks all the boxes. There's no kind of heavy onboarding. It was something that I really intuitively understood straight away.
Yeah.
So I was talking with other people on my team, which kind of led to, we were really looking to how SharePoint integration could be done with this, and how we could do automations with Power Automate, and kind of really have an operational model that can enhance customer experience in a lot of ways. The first thing that we all said was, it'd be so cool if we could see the page inside Word as we're editing it. And I was like, I'm sure Microsoft do document everything, so of course there's an API for adding Office add-ins, and it's relatively simple to spin one up. So started working on that, and really just looking at what's done in the Sidekick, and then reading through the admin API documentation, and started to piece together. I wish I had known that the Sidekick all was code on GitHub, because I didn't look at any of it, and I coded heaps, and I was like, oh, I could have just been reading off the Sidekick extension code, but I guess you learn more doing somehow. So yeah, like the Word add-in basically, and it's the same as the Sidekick, so hopefully this is going to share the right screen.
Yep. So if you're new to Discord, you have to click WAF stream to see Jake's screen. So just give people a couple of seconds. I can see your screen, Jake, so I think you can continue.
Thank you. So it's basically a Sidekick. It will be listed on the app source, the Office 365 store. There's a process kind of like the iOS app store process to get it added there. Essentially, it just adds this AM Sidekick widget. When you click it, it basically loads all of the same loads the status of the page, and then provides this preview for you. And the nice thing is that you can really then just quickly, make a change. It's so simple. Make sure that it's saved, and then hit preview, and it's kind of the simplified editing workflow as opposed to jumping between different tabs. And the thing that I noticed a lot with the Chrome Sidekick, and it's by no means like throwing shade or anything, but you're jumping between tabs. Sometimes the tab that the page is open in gets lost, so I'm not even sure where I'm previewing, but With this, you're kind of all located in one place. And then you can just do a preview. So you also, I just started kind of expanding upon it then, and just like it's a credit to all of you guys. The documentation is really good. So reading through the admin API guide, documentation, it updates all of these different timestamps, obviously, and then you can also clear the cache for this particular page. I'm guessing from Fastly or the CDN, and then reindex. And then remove it from any indexes. So it's really just kind of trying to provide the similar level of functionality that's there in the Chrome and Safari Sidekick in Word. And so obviously this is desktop. This is Word in the browser, so you get the Chrome Sidekick extension as well. Works exactly the same. Essentially, if you come to your page, you're kind of presented with this configuration item, and then you can just pop your. I hope I've got the right ones for this one. I think it's page. This one. So I have got error handling, so if we can't find the page, it's going to fail out. The nice thing about this, though, is if you've already got it inside of a document, so for example here, and this is if you're opening a local file, catching all of the errors has kind of been the hardest part. This is like a live demo. I don't know where the other word window is gone. Yeah. So this is just another example page. This is desktop Word though. So you can just open and close the Sidekick. You can have other Sidekicks. The main thing I was really interested in is I love AI stuff, and I kind of was looking at. I posted on LinkedIn as well about how to use Google Docs and Zapier to kind of automatically generate a bunch of pages. So I really was like, how do I do that in SharePoint as well? Because I think a lot more of our customers are interested in using SharePoint. But yeah, I mean, it just makes the editing. You just hit save, you hit preview, and it's a couple of seconds, as you already know. So that's pretty much it. It'll be available on the Microsoft Store, so you can add it to your own words.
Yeah, that's really cool. I'm thinking you should probably submit this to our aem blog party, which we initially started really as a collection of blogs, but in the meantime it has grown to be a collection of any kind of tool. So we can make it a bit easier for people to discover this. I think this is really fantastic, and I've seen you have the source code for this on GitHub. So my initial assumption was that you just took our Chrome Sidekick source code for this, and one thing that I think obviously it turns out you didn't. Instead.
I wish I did. I wish I did. To be honest.
No, and that's one of the reasons why we make so much of this source code open source, right? Because the basic idea is anything that is running ostensibly on your infrastructure should be open source, right? This is why things like boilerplate obviously need to be open source, but also most of the libraries that handle the markdown extensions that we have, and so on, are open source, which means you can go really, really deep with integrating this kind of tooling. And I've only watched the development of the Sidekick from the sidelines, pun intended. But the interesting thing is that there's a similar code base for the Chrome extension and the bookmarklet, right? Or for the Chrome extension, for the Safari extension, and the bookmarklet. So being in a place where we separate the code that is responsible for showing the buttons, right, and performing the action, and the code that is talking to the overall outer ecosystem, right, whether it's Chrome or whether it's Safari or whether it's just a web page in the case of the bookmarklet, or whether it's Word in the case of your Word plugin. I think that would make a lot of sense and would help would help making sure that the feature that we roll out in one sidekick can make it into all of the sidekicks, right? I think that could be one thing. The other thing is that you might know is that we have a bit of instrumentation for the sidekick that is part of the Chrome plugin, and that's also something that we could add to your sidekick, so that you have a better understanding of what actions are actually used most frequently. And in the case of the AEM sidekick, it's preview and publish and reload in that order. So I think it's going to be very similar, and that's really instructive, right? Because in a lot of cases we have projects that are adding buttons to the sidekick and are using the built-in extensibility, and we are always interested to see what's making the break. Right? What are the parts that have universal applicability across the wider customer base, so that we can pull them into the product. And one way to look at this obviously is to say, well, the key to making the sidekick more useful is not to give it more feature, but to make it more natively integrated into the environment that the author is already in. So, yeah, really glad to see this. It's going to be exciting to see what this means in terms of Microsoft Store adoption, and how easy or hard it is for customers to install this, right?
Yeah, it's not easy, to be honest. And like the add-ins are quite squirreled away. But there are a lot of add-ins on the store, so I think for those that know about it, I mean, it's still a reasonably niche set of people that will be using it. So I would just, when we're doing the demos of edge delivery services, I've been using it as well to say, like, you can have native integration. So kind of using that as a selling point. I think the accessibility part is really cool. Yeah, because like I use this the library stuff as well. So I have the button here so you can open a new window and open your block library. And I mean, this kind of fills in all the gaps for me in terms of the authoring experience. I was looking at putting this inside of the window, but it comes with some UX impacts, like if it's too small, the library didn't display correctly. So, I mean, it's really cool to work on something like this, to be honest, where you can just see the improvements happen really quickly. So yeah, thanks for letting me demo.
Yeah, and when it comes to these plugin screens, right, there's always the temptation to say, let's open a smaller screen within an existing screen, and but then you have to remember not everyone is bringing the 20-inch display, but a lot of people are working on small laptop screens, right? And then you quickly get to the point where you say, well, let's just open the full window, so that, and especially for things like the library, right, where you want to browse your assets, and your assets, they obviously have a different impact when you're looking at them as postcards instead of thumbnails, right? So this is, this is great to see. Thank you, Jake, for sharing. Thank everyone.
First of all, great work, mate. That looks really cool. Question for you: if you had unlimited time, what's the next thing you'd build? Like, what's missing?
In the Sidekick or in my life in general?
Well, you can go there if you want, but
in the Sidekick, I think I haven't done the authentication piece, and there's still a bit where I think, in terms of how the clearing of cache, in terms of how the permissioning works from the SharePoint, it'd be really useful to have that integrated, because I think that's done in the Sidekick and or with the Chrome extension one, and I've been passing through that, figuring out how that works. The only thing is the revision history. So I saw a post, and I was kind of going back through the Discord, and somebody posted that there was a revision history put into the SharePoint Sidekick, I think, as an addition. So I think having that as a part of this integration would be really handy. Because it seems that the admin APIs don't return back anything about the user that did the publishing action, for example. but I think you can get them out of maybe not the publishing out of SharePoint, but you could get like the last author or the last modified author out of that API, the graph. So that would probably be the next thing. Try to integrate more, but like you say, Lars, it's like I don't want to put too many features in. I think you kind of end up. I don't want to have this massive multi-tool. If it works good and does a simple task, that's probably about where I'll leave it.
Right.
I was more interested in the gap, not the solve, but thank you. Yeah, it's good.
Okay. Okay, very
Good.
cool.
Well, and thanks for showcasing Australia as well. It's good to have Ring in the same time zone.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, so Mark, you're in Sydney, right?
I am in Sydney, yeah.
Okay. So Melbourne, Sydney.
Just up the road.
According to my understanding of geography, you're right in the neighborhood of Perth, so it's all the same country. It can't be too far away.
Get in the car and you can be there.
Yeah. Okay. So in the beginning, as usual, I've asked for launches, but obviously tonight is Halloween. So we want to turn the topic to something that is spooky and scarier. So the scariest thing to me is an outage of Edge delivery services, to be honest. And I think all of us who've built websites, who are running websites for clients, have experienced this. So I would like to use this as an opportunity to talk about a couple of the scary outages that you've experienced and how you've overcome them, and how you've made sure that this never happens again. Doesn't have to be AEM related. I'm obviously very happy to talk about the failures of other people's technology as well. And if you feel too scared to get started, then I can talk, and we can talk about the latest outage that we had in. No, let's talk about not the last outage that we had, because that was a really actually we can talk about this. So this was earlier this month. As you probably know, as part of our general availability, we've been migrating a bunch of stuff, right? So the homepage has changed from hlx.live to aem.live, and we had this domain, the aem.live domain, for a very long time. We acquired the aem.page domain very recently. We have a couple of things that are coming there, but the most important thing is that we now have www.aem.live as our homepage, and we've been in getting that homepage live. We did have a couple of hiccups. The first hiccup was that for about half of our customers, when we first started it, right, and when we first started saying, okay, the content is now available both on hlx.live and aem.live, for about half of our customers, the page wasn't available. Right? So they were saying, I can't open the page, it's not resolvable. People within the Adobe network were getting a message that this content has been blocked by Adobe IT, which is also interesting, right? What does Adobe IT have against aem.live? And it turned out that I've been causing the issue because I was too clever for my own good. This was, and you probably know that it's always DNS when something's going down. In this case, it was DNS. So the issue here was that I tried to use a technique called CNAME chaining. And CNAME chaining basically means that you have one DNS record for www.aem.live, and you point it using a CNAME to another domain. And this other domain was www.aem-fastly.live, right? And aem-fastly.live was pointing again through a CNAME to the Fastly CDN. And this is absolutely legal according to the DNS spec, and it's supported by about half of all DNS implementations, which is really, really funny, right? Because it's working, it can work perfectly for you, and it's completely broken for your neighbor, depending on what kind of ISP you're using, what kind of DNS infrastructure there's in place. And one of the most prominent places where it broke was actually within AWS. So we couldn't even purge our own caches. So that's when we decided, well, CNAME chaining sounds like a good idea, but it is not a good idea. So let's turn it off. We turned it off, and all of the problems resolved themselves. Well, literally within minutes, right? Literally within the TTL of, I think now give me 1 second. I think my screen froze because I triggered one of the, give me 1 second.
I think it's the hat.
No, I think it's, come on. It's the, Apple has this new feature of reactions. So if you put your
thumbs up, it crashes Discord.
if you put exactly, if you put a thumbs up, or if you make a heart gesture, then input device. Wait, I'm just sorry for this. I'm trying to switch the camera. So, is that working better? Yeah, you can see me. Not the best camera. Sorry for that, but at least I'm able to move again. So, to close the sidebar, if you have installed macOS Sonoma and you're using some gestures, including the double thumbs up, putting the hand next to your face, making a heart gesture, then it will put funny animations. And apparently this is freezing my external camera. So I thought I had disabled it, but I didn't disable it everywhere. So now let's go back to CNAME chaining. We turned off CNAME chaining, and everything magically worked. Adobe IT's firewall didn't have any complaints about aem-live anymore, and it worked perfectly. We kept it running for 2 weeks, and then we said, okay, now it's time to do the complete switchover. So we are going to set up a redirect. We're going to set up a redirect from www.aem.live, www.hlx.live to www.aem.live. And this was when we caused the October outage, because some of our customers were using the Sidekick library extension. And the Sidekick library extension is hosted on www.hlx.live. It's also now hosted on www.aem.live. But these customers didn't allow the Sidekick didn't allow their sites to access www.aem.live, so they didn't have this in their CSV, and which basically broke the Sidekick library functionality for them. Right, so it was a very contained outage, affected only a handful of customers, but it affected them in a very hard to trace way, right? Because we didn't know what was going on. We didn't immediately know what was going on, and the change that we thought, well, this is just our documentation and marketing side, in the end affected authoring for our customers. So one of the outcomes of this, and I think this is always the most interesting part of any outage, is what are you going to do differently in the future to make sure that this never repeats, is to make sure that we are not going to host these resources on www.aem.live or hlx.live or any of our marketing sites, right? So that we have a stricter separation between the stuff that is product and the stuff that is just essentially just another website on top of the product, which is really what www.aem-live is now about. So that's my first scary outage story of the day. So is there one that you want to share, that you have?
Sounds like group therapy. A chance to let it get out of your system.
Yeah. And Mark, in the pre-meeting chat, you said, "Well, I'm a product marketer. I only talk about lollipops and rainbows and sunshine with customers." And I think one important part of what we do with Edge Delivery, right, is that we want to offer a product that has absolutely high availability, right? And the right way to get there is to have the right practices around how to deal with outages and the right degree of transparency, and having the ability to talk with customers about this. Right? So this is obviously something that I want to instill in every part of the organization, even in our product marketing team. So let's not be so afraid of outages and downtimes that we don't talk about them, right? But instead make them something to discuss, to address, and to share, because that helps us establish better practices, and that helps us achieve better uptime and essentially lower impact outages in the future.
Yeah, 100%. I just don't get involved in projects, so I don't have any horror stories.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe I can share one.
Yes.
It's not from my time with Adobe, it's from my previous employer, where I was responsible for software managing warehouses. And one day we got a call from a customer that there seems to be a bug that didn't allow stock to be put into the warehouse. So it was a fairly big warehouse, and they usually are located close to highways, right, because of the trucking that's going on. And then, he said, we're trying to fix this in 3 hours, and we have like 150 trucks waiting. And just imagine how long is a truck? So 150 times the truck length. So the village was already fully on full stop. Everywhere trucks. And it ended actually that way that we got calls from the highway police because trucks were chained down up to 30 miles. And that was a quite big intrusive way of stopping Switzerland for a day, basically.
Wow.
That was really tough when you could hear in the news, there's a lot of trucks and the highway's blocked, you have to go around like 150 miles to avoid that junction stuff. And you're just trying here to fix that stupid bug, right, that somebody introduced a few years back. That's obviously not working in the company any longer, so that was a few hard hours that day. And the aftermath was taking about 1.5 days to clear up, so that was fun. So sometimes what we do in software has some real effect on physics, right, and our environment. So that was, I think, the major thing there. I don't even remember what actually was the cause. I just remember all the surroundings. So,
okay, that's a really cool story. But when you started telling it, I thought, data center next to a highway, or that sounds like the trucks are going to cause the outage. But instead it was the other. Instead, it was the other thing. The trucks were impacted by the outage.
exactly.
Yeah. Good. So
we got the experience with AEM, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking probably the as far as I know, no country yet is running their highway signage based on AEM screens, but once that happens, we would have the opportunity to
Exactly.
to one up that. So yeah. Okay. So Julian, I don't know if you can talk, but I would expect that you have a bunch of really funny and really scary outage stories that you can talk about.
Yeah, maybe I can
Yeah,
share
sure.
one story about which is more in the category of Murphy's Law,
Yeah.
where we had an outage of our authoring environment in an on-premise asset installation, which was running for 4 months without any issues, so no problems at all, and there's quite a lot of traffic ongoing on this system, but we had to switch. Um, 2 or 3 months back to ImageMagick for asset processing,
Yeah.
running on that system, and we have been that experience with that in terms of all the parameters. Everyone who knows ImageMagick knows that there are hundreds of parameters that you can tune around to make it stable and also to get quality. So it's actually a pain. But nevertheless, we had to switch. We did, and then we had a company event, and more or less each and everyone was in travel mode. And that was exactly the time when really no one was around. And the authors have started uploading huge TIFF files, gigabyte large TIFF files, and ImageMagick went crazy completely. And we had hundreds of workflows. The system was completely going down. No one was able to work for hours. And yeah, at the end we got it fixed. One had to change his flight and took one later to deal with that. Others have been arrived in the location meanwhile and took over. And yeah, so we found the root cause. Everything was fixed then, and we are now looking for alternatives to ImageMagick. But yeah, that was Murphy's Law. It was really running for 4 months without any issues, and then when everyone is in travel mode, then shit hits the fan.
Right. And the authors were at a client, and your company was traveling. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that authoring environment is heavily used, so we have really hundreds of editors working in parallel sometimes, and that's always if we have an outage on that system, then it has quite an impact.
Right. Yeah. I can imagine. And normally, the safest time in terms of uptime is when the developers are on vacation or when there's a public holiday, right? So the interesting thing about what we think causes outages is things like big physical impact, right? Things like a data center gets flooded or hit by a meteor or something like that. And the reality is, it's almost always an accidental configuration action, right? Somebody mistyped a command, did a SQL update with the wrong where clause, or just deployed a new version. And this is typically happening Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, right? So this was an interesting learning for us when we started to go on a regular on-call rotation, right? Because we found out what we were scared about was this situation, right? You get a page at 3 a.m. in the morning. You don't know what's going on, and something happened. And the funny thing is, this never happens, right? The situations that we're dealing with, like the one that I talked about, right, were caused during normal working hours, because during normal working hours, somebody, in this case myself, set up a redirect, which then had the impact of other people during their normal working hours. So all of this could be addressed during normal working hours, which is good, but it also tells you that the safest thing in terms of uptime is to just send your developers home. They're the ones who will bring the system down in the end.
Yeah.
I think that's how we stay in the job. It has to crash sometime, otherwise why do we need to exist? So, I had one, it's similar to the image magic, but this was an authoring thing before dynamic media existed, and we just had the authors allowed to put whatever media they wanted on the homepage, and we're like, why is the homepage? It was quite a big high traffic site in Australia. And why is the homepage like it's so slow? We're checking everything. We're checking the last deployments that everybody did. It was just in the midst of a really big transitional period as well, where we were converting all these components from 6.1 to 6.3. And the author had just uploaded like a 50 meg JPEG, put it as the home banner.
Right.
And yeah, it took longer than we thought it should have to figure out what the problem was. And then we all were like, well, you're not allowed to do that any longer. But
yeah. So the issue was just the 50 megabyte JPEG itself.
Yeah. Because it was like the hero banner, so everything else was lazy loaded, but the hero banner, and we didn't have any like image renditions or anything. It was just linking directly to an image.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Quite a while ago.
Yeah. I can see that how that is making things slower, and yeah, and obviously this was before we had this, so let's say, more sophisticated attitude to web performance that we have now, right? Which is also I think in very many regards a blessing, right? That we now have a common language to talk about performance and to say, well, what we're dealing with here is not a time to first byte issue, so we know, okay, this must be something in the payload that is being delivered, and then you can say, oh yeah, we're delivering 50 megabytes of JPEG to every browser. That can take a while. Yeah.
Yeah, and this was when Australian internet was quite a ways behind the rest of the world, I would say. So we were on like 1 megabit, 512 kilobit was an impressive internet connection. So this was a critical, like the site doesn't load issue. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So that was the home internet connectivity, right? Not the connectivity to the rest of the world through undersea cables.
No, like I don't know, when did we get the NBN mark? That would have been 5-6 years ago, maybe more. 20, yeah. So before then we had ADSL, but it was always quite heavily metered here. Unless you were on cable in the capital cities was the thing. But anyway, Australian internet has a long and tortured history.
Yeah. Okay. So, Ina, you're a bit late to the party, but we are sharing outage stories. So if you have one to share, we'd be happy to hear and commiserate, given that it's Halloween and that we want to talk about scary things. If you don't, then I will pull out another DNS story.
I had a scary one with Cloud Manager on AMS, but this is not Edge.
That's fine. That's fine. You can talk about AEM. We've been talking about an outage to a warehouse that was causing a 2-day backlog on, I think, the Swiss highway system. So I'm actually grateful if it's not my own technology that's going down, at least metaphorically, for a change. So please share.
It was not so scary as your outage, but it was annoying and scary because, so at the end, it was an usual AMS setup, 2 publishers, and one publisher was already out of the load balancer. Cloud Manager said everything failed, so it stopped with one publisher out, and then someone pressed rerun the pipeline, and then the second publisher was also out. And then we learned that there is a feature which is called last man standing, which is not enabled by default, which was a bit scary, because also the hotline that if I have a campaign issue, I need to write something to someone else, and I said, no, it's an AEM issue, not a campaign. So it was crazy, but it was not a long one, but it was just, it just came in my mind when I thought about Gary and outages.
So what's the last man standing feature?
Last man standing means that the load balancer checks if there is still one publisher running, and if there is if there's only one publisher running, then it's not releasing the last publisher. So last man or last publisher standing at the end, kind of. Okay. So before removing the last publisher, it's just not removing it.
Right. Yeah.
But this is not enabled by default, which I would have assumed that this is the case.
Yeah, it sounds like it sounds like a very sensible default. So.
So I'm not sure if someone said they want to fix it, but I'm not sure if it's fixed in the meantime.
Right.
Because it's hard to test also.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think trying to intervene in an outage and making it worse, that's probably one of the scariest things that I can imagine, right? And it's
if you're sitting there, you cannot do anything, because if you call the hotline, they tell you crazy stuff which doesn't help, and you should open a ticket at the end.
Yeah.
Which will take definitely too long to get it fixed. So during that time, the server is definitely out, and you need just someone who's enabling the server and the load balancer. This was a bit, scary.
Yeah.
But at the end, the second after, I think the outage was not really long, so not multiple days as you had.
Right.
It was just annoying and scary that you need to sit there and you have no chance to do anything, kind of. You just can wait that the load balancer is on a step that it's just enabled again.
Yeah.
This was the scary part. Sitting there without any chance of doing something.
Yeah. Yeah, that reminds me of our September 26th outage that we had last month. Which was basically caused by Adobe's DNS infrastructure being DDoSed. So so the background of this is that we moved the DNS infrastructure we basically had the DNS infrastructure for HLX.live scattered across a bunch of cloud providers for a very long time, and as we've been moving closer to GA, we said no, let's use the official Adobe DNS outage. The official Adobe DNS infrastructure. I'm getting ahead of myself, and everything was fine until it wasn't, which was on September 26th, when Adobe was hit by a really large DDoS attack on the DNS on the DNS infrastructure, taking down one or two of the DNS servers. So we had 4 DNS servers, all in one of our data centers, and of course when this happens, it's basically all hands on deck for the DNS team, right? So, and for us, the interesting part was, because it's DNS, it's the impact is not very clear to see, right? When your CDN is down, you absolutely know what's happening, because every site is down. When DNS is down, it's only affecting a couple of customers and a couple of geos a couple of times, and right, and the thing is, DNS wasn't even down. DNS just had much longer response times, right? Going from something like 200 milliseconds to 20 seconds. which is obviously clear when it's overloaded, right? And a lot of downstream DNS infrastructure simply didn't wait for 20 seconds. Other infrastructure waited for 20 seconds and then cached it more aggressively. And this was why we've been getting very, very mixed reports, right? We've been thinking, okay, this is really seems to be just a problem with one particular ISP, and then it's 3 particular ISPs, and then it's one particular country and 3 ISPs, and so really, really hard to diagnose. And then on top of that, we had the fact that the Adobe DNS team said, okay, we fixed it, the attack is over, and that was really happening exactly at the time when we thought, okay, there was something real. So we said, okay, perfect, the attack is over, the issue has been resolved. No need to raise a big CSO out of this. But the attack wasn't over. The issue wasn't resolved. It came back, and we've been still in this mode where we didn't know exactly what was happening, who was impacted, right? And really only a minority of customers were impacted. But for those that were impacted, it was super annoying because they couldn't access any of their authoring, right? Page delivery was, to our knowledge, never really impacted, but authoring definitely was. And we then, in the end, raised the proper incident, made the Adobe DNS team aware of this, and that was the other part, right? Getting the attention of a team that is in heavy firefighting mode, right, and saying, hey, my house is also burning, can be a bit difficult. And you mentioned this, how scary it is when your house is burning and the firefighters are saying, please open a ticket with us, and we're going to end it to the end of our backlog. So we managed to get the firefighters' attention, and they said, you know what, we do have a separate DNS infrastructure. We can just move your domains over to this. And this was then, in the end, what fixed the problem. So Adobe, in addition to having an on-premise DNS infrastructure, also had a Ultra DNS as a DNS provider, and they obviously have, because they're a shared system, they have much bigger machines. Oh yeah, you've muted yourself. So we managed to get moved over to more stable DNS infrastructure, and everything was fine after that. But we did a very, very hard look at ourselves and said, okay, what did we do to get into this situation in the first place? So part of this is that we are now changing our procedures to call CSOs way more aggressively, right? Which means you might see issues popping up on status.helix.live more frequently, even if they don't affect you directly, which obviously is the best case of issues to deal with. And we've also changed our monitoring setup so that, for instance, it's simulating these impatient DNS resolvers that don't wait for 20 seconds, but just wait for 2 seconds before they decide that it's not worth responding. And of course, we are also going to move to a completely redundant DNS infrastructure, just like we have completely redundant CDN infrastructure already. So the plan is to make sure that this is the case. As part of this, I learned something really interesting about AWS Route 53. So when you look at Route 53, you will notice that they have really, really strange names for their root DNS servers. So they have a couple of root DNS servers on .com, one on .net, one on .co.uk, and one additional. And the background of this is that this is actually an insurance against any of the root DNS servers going down. because the root DNS servers are managed, or the registrars for .com, .uk, .net, and one more that I don't recall right now, they're all managed by different organizations, right? So if somebody managed to take down .com, right, which is theoretically speaking possible, you could take down the entire .com world. Then AWS Route 53 would still be standing, because they also have .net and .co.uk resolvers. So, so we're going to move to this fully redundant DNS infrastructure, and then the last, that's really the cherry on top of this entire outage ice cream, is the status page was not accessible for some customers, because the status page, status.hlx.live, was on the hlx.live domain, which was part of our DNS, right? So so that's the next part, that we're going to move this to aem-status.net, and as part of that, just to add one more sidebar that's making this really interesting. As part of that, we said, okay, we're going to use a different DNS registrar to register this domain, so we are now going to have aem-status.net, which is basically mimicking AWS's approach. And we thought, okay, what can we use as a DNS registrar? Went with Cloudflare, because we already are using them as CDN, and the chance that both parts are going down at the same time is relatively small. And then we discovered that Cloudflare as a registrar forces you to use Cloudflare as a DNS provider, which we definitely don't want, right, in order to have this redundancy. So now we have to wait for 2 months before we can move that domain off Cloudflare the registrar, so that we can move it off Cloudflare the DNS provider, so that we can use it. So in about 1 month from now, you're going to see a new status page on aem-status.net, but it still takes a month for Cloudflare to release us from our shackles of mandatory registrar binding, which I think is a protection against domain squatting. So yeah, so that's my second big out.